Yeah, it's great. Well, you missed it last week. Jeremy had all of these like little gnomes and different Christmas ornaments in his beard. Now he has the lights, which is good, you know. So next week it'll be a combo of both, I'm sure.
Yeah, you can fashion your beard however you want.
So Joe, I've seen reports that Sturgis was responsible for over 100,000 cases of COVID.
Interest is community.
Okay.
So if we want to jump right into that,
Let's do it. Let's jump into it.
well,
I mean, we're not jumping into it. You came late.
honestly, first off, the study that was done there was based on, I don't know if you guys read about that, but it was based on cell phone data and basically like the people, how do I put this? It was based on the areas where people went back to and then how their cases rose. So like all the people that came to Sturgis were tracked on their way home, and then they took data from all of that and put out the numbers based on how much those areas' cases of COVID rose. We did actually test. Our Department of Health did a bunch of testing, and I think we had like 27 cases or something in Sturgis.
But there's only like 40 people there, so that's like half the population.
Well, there's like 4,000 or 7,000. 7,000.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's what it is. I think. Yeah, it had to. I don't know. Maybe it's 4,000. It's got to be 4,000. 7,000. That sounds too much. Here, we're gonna look that up real quick. But anyway, so basically, what they were saying is that study was saying that half of the people that showed up got it and took it back home with them. I mean, that's essentially what they were getting at. Because the only way for 250,000 people to get it in the end is if 250,000 people got it while they were here.
No, it's not about that. No, it's like the months from now, all of the exponential growth. Once they go to their own communities, there's gonna be further transmission beyond that. I think that's the number.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So the base number may only be a couple thousand.
Yeah.
But then once they go home, when they infect 2 people, then those people will all infect on average 2 people, and it'll exponentially grow from there.
The way I interpreted the entire study, and I'm not the biggest fan of Sturgis anyway, so don't take my defense of Sturgis with a grain of salt, because the rally has nothing to offer me. And if we didn't have it, I'd be happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't really care about the tourist economy necessarily. We're perfectly fine without a bunch of people stomping all over my forest. But really what I saw from that study was the figures that the South Dakota Department of Health came up with didn't fit the narrative, so they did a new study based on whatever factors they wanted to decide. They people that wanted there to be a big number, and so they created it, and that's how science works.
Yeah.
Just in general, if you come into it with a bias and you're looking for something, well, you can manipulate things to tell you whatever you want.
That sounds like a paranoid conspiracy, that somebody would write the outcome of the study before they did the study.
Well, I mean, that's honestly about the scenario, though. The people that did the study wanted it to say certain things. They were looking,
I agree with you, Sage. Nice to meet you.
Joe. It just says Sage.
Joe, okay. Okay, nice to meet you, Joe. I agree with you because when we started in med school, we had this class for learning how to read studies. And once you know how studies can be made, it's very, very easy to manipulate them. So now I have been receiving daily lots of information and studies from different parts of the world through this Medscape application,
Right.
and you can see how every country, every city is focused on their own interests. So I think no studies are trustable now.
Right.
It's too soon,
I completely agree with
and
that.
they are manipulating it. They are manipulating it because of political ways. For example, the vaccine stuff. It's becoming very political. Sounds like the Cold War again.
Mhm.
Who's going to win the prize for getting the vaccine first?
Right.
So
Yeah,
I agree.
They're definitely.
Studies are not trusted.
Yeah, and people are arguing over like figures, like cases. I mean, that's all you ever hear anymore. And those
Right.
they're so the way
There are a lot of people that are okay after that.
Right, absolutely. Well, the narrative in the beginning,
So,
yes, and then it's somewhere along the line changed the cases.
Mhm.
You know, everybody was
Right.
about deaths at first, and then that wasn't like scaring people enough. So now it's all about cases.
So you know, I didn't
Right.
read that article. I read the headline, and that's how I interpreted that number, 250,000. But what I did look into were some YouTube videos, and there were some good YouTube videos, especially the guy from All Gas No Brakes. Do you know this guy?
Right.
He's like a comedian. He goes to music festivals and he like interviews people that are on drugs and like makes fun of them, makes them feel really uncomfortable. It's comedy, but it was really interesting to see how much of like the conspiracy. It's like every single person that he talked to was talking about the conspiracies. And
Right.
was like talking about like their right to do, and he was wearing a mask the entire time. Like at one point he got attacked by somebody that like jumped on and was trying to take his mask off, and they were like talking shit to him, and you know he just like defiantly wore his mask and was just like, no, you guys are free, I'm not judging you guys, like this is my choice to wear my mask. He was the only person in the entire video of like hundreds of people in his video.
It was like maybe 1 in 1,000 people down there that was wearing a mask.
Yeah. So yeah, what shined out to me in watching that coverage was how deep these conspiracies are and how it is related. Like, yeah. But
one of the things worth noting is that we're coming to a point where that word, specifically conspiracy, is being bastardized, basically. So if anybody thinks anything other than the narrative, they're thinking it's a conspiracy. And then if you use that word conspiracy, it automatically implies like it's fake. It shouldn't be believed. They're just some crackpot, tinfoil, whatever, you know? It's kind of like the word myth. Like, people use the word myth like fiction, but myth doesn't mean fiction. It just means a spoken story. That's all.
Right.
It has nothing to do with fiction necessarily.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with the word conspiracy. We say the word conspiracy, and people are like, "Oh yeah, it's just a bunch of BS," you know. And it's not necessarily the case. I mean, there are factors there. Is there some person in the background, in the shadows, like pulling strings, like a puppet master? No, probably not. You know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of ways which shit gets conflated.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier.
Right.
Like I was
I
talking
think there's
Go ahead, Priscilla. Go.
I think there's no just one person behind this. I think this thing happened. The virus is real, but many people in different places and are using it for their own benefit. So it's like taking advantage.
Right.
Okay, this happened, and I have enough influence or money or power to use this thing that happened for my own interest.
Well, and that money and power aside, I mean, people are just using it to validate their feelings of fear and validate the hysteria that they're causing. You know,
Right.
even regular people that have no influence, no power, are using all of these, studies and all of these articles and all of this madness to essentially validate their feeling of something is wrong with the world, and their version of what's wrong is what they're trying to validate. I think we're all kind of on the same page that there's something wrong, but does that mean that it's a virus that's wiping everybody out? No. Does that mean it's the political system? No. Everybody's got a different thing that they're trying to preach to everybody else, and this is an example of what can be used to validate this. So, and I had another theory, actually. I just randomly thought about this one night laying on the couch. So we have a virus that is asymptomatic, right? So a bunch of people are not showing symptoms, they're not showing signs of anything wrong with them, but they're testing positive. And then you get sick, you go to the doctor, and you get tested for COVID, you're positive with COVID, but that does not mean that the sickness that you're feeling is COVID, because if COVID is asymptomatic, it can be present in your system, and you not be showing any symptoms, and you could have influenza, you could have, bronchitis, whatever, pneumonia, whatever, but test positive for COVID and have any related symptoms, they're just like, COVID, that's it. No more discussion. And all things considered, I don't necessarily, with all the things that we've seen about false positives and this and that, it's just the whole testing thing is just madness. So,
are you bringing more conspiracies to the table, Joe? Is that what's happening?
What's that?
Are you bringing more conspiracies to the table?
That was just a random thought.
I actually think I will agree, because in America, I know a lot of people that they haven't been to a doctor in 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Not a lot of people go for annual checkups.
Yeah.
So suddenly they get paranoid. They think they have COVID, and they do, and maybe they have it. They test positive for it, but suddenly it's like there might be a lot wrong with you because you never. You haven't been treated for so long for anything.
Yeah, you're not in touch with.
It's like I tend to get dizzy all the time and things like that. Like, well, it could be COVID. It could also mean your blood pressure is off the charts high, and you never knew that.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. My friend, a healthy 22-year-old, was wiped off his feet for 3 weeks when he got COVID. So sometimes it's very symptomatic, and
sometimes it is.
there's no confusion there. It's like that was COVID.
Yeah. I'm definitely not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm not saying that there isn't a virus, and I think that's something that's manipulated too on the other side of the fence. Is people are like, "Oh, it's all fake."
Yeah.
And it's, we got to be realistic here. Like, there's something going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
There has to be some sort of foundation to this. They're like, oh, just COVID's the blah, blah, blah. It's just it's the boogeyman. It's fake. It doesn't actually exist. And it's like, well, now you're just went to the other side.
Well, so that was like 100% of the people in those Sturgis videos. They were like, it was like November 4th. Watch November 4th come around, and COVID's going to be gone. We won't see COVID anymore as soon as November 4th comes around. Many people had said that in the video. Right. So,
it's already kind of leaning that way, to be honest. It's already kind of slipping into there's other things that people are worrying about now, because it's been around for so long that people are like tired of talking about it.
Yeah.
We've just kind of gotten used to it.
Right, exactly. Yep. So, and now if it does disappear around that time, people are going to be like, oh, see, it was all political. And it's like, well, anything to get riled up. We live in that kind of culture where we're,
Well, but that's where the puppet masters are able to exercise their control by keeping the populations in a perpetual state of being triggered.
Right. Oh man.
That's how you control massive amounts of people, is you keep them constantly afraid of stuff.
100%. Absolutely. That's absolutely real. And if you don't believe in the CIA and all that stuff doing wild shit, you've just been ignoring shit.
Oh no, that's for real. Yeah. I don't think that's conspiracy. I think that like there's precedent and there's knowing of that stuff going on.
Right. That's it. It's super obvious. It's been known for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
There's
I'm rarely surprised to hear about human beings doing fucked up shit to other human beings.
Right. Absolutely.
It's been
That's
happening.
It's like that's what we do. We've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, it's the rule, not the exception. But that's what the Bible's trying to tell us. That's what Buddhism's trying to tell us, is that the baseline is suffering, and it's up to you to carry your cross up the hill, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you to bring the light into the dark room, and you have to do it willingly. You have to do it voluntarily. You have to find some sort of purpose in this life to bring light into it, And so, yeah, it's just natural for things to, it's like entropy, If things are left alone, they just start to deteriorate. It's like, well, if that doesn't sum up humans, I don't know what does.
When I was studying history, this one professor said it's important for you to how you view history, because most people view history as peace is the default and war is the exception. And he said, I see history as a constant war and peace is the exception. So he says you have to find like which is it, and a lot of historians, he says, it's what perspective are you coming at?
It's the glass half empty or half full.
Yeah, and history. I mean, when you really read it, it's a horror story.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
It's a bloodbath. It's awful. So I tend, so realistically, it's human beings are in a constant state of war, and peace is the exception. It's like the periods of peace, because one thing in history that's consistent is that the longer the peace, the greater the war.
right.
Like if you have extended periods of peace, that's not good, because when it ends, it's going to be catastrophic.
Right. Absolutely.
And we've actually been living in one of the most peaceful centuries. If you go back a couple millennium, the 1900s were probably one of the more peaceful centuries.
Mm-hmm. And history kind of works in waves, because you have, it kind of goes back, you have the Hebrew thinking and the Greek thinking. Greeks believed that that mankind on his own can accomplish all things. And the Hebrews believe that we will always fall short and we have a higher power to help us. So those are phases in history. So like you have the Roman Empire, which you have the Greek and the Roman Empire. When that collapsed, you had the so-called Dark Ages. Then you had like the Carolingian Renaissance, and then another period of war. And then you had the real Renaissance, and then it led into war. And then you had the Enlightenment. So mankind always gets to the point where they tend to have a crisis. And that crisis usually is, why are we doing this? Because Michelangelo, there's writings of Michelangelo at the end of his life, just like absolute despair. What was the point of me doing this? And everybody celebrating him as the greatest man that ever lived. But he saw everything as futile. And then, that seems to be what's happening, but we're still stuck in the Enlightenment. So we're still stuck in an age that's been going on for about 200 to 300 years. And this is an extended period. This is an unusually extended period.
Yeah, there's a thing that says,
yeah, that's why they say study history, and there are patterns to history. Know your history, and you can understand the world today a little better.
Right. Yeah, there's a phrase that says, what is it? Hard times create strong men. Strong men
Right.
create good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. I mean, it's just like it's a
Totally.
cycle. And it makes perfect sense if you break it down. when things get if we're living in utopia, we're living, you know, in a perfect world, things are gonna eventually start to fall apart. And then as it reaches more and more and more chaos, as it fractalizes out into more and more chaos, eventually things are so chaotic that the order starts to come back. And that order starts to come back and things start to get more and more peaceful. And then it keeps doing that. You know what I mean? It's the yin yang, it's the Tai Chi in essence. You know, that's what the yin and yang symbolizes. This is a cycle, you know, things are bound to fall apart, but they're also bound to get better, you know.
From the way you explain that, it sounds like men are the problem.
That's kind of how a lot of religions and stuff put it, you know. But we got to look at it as not so much as men, but as like consciousness is its own problem, if you will.
Yeah, there was a dude that came into the tea house during Burning Man. He was like a researcher in Hong Kong that specialized in studying the two different states that you can be in, that your mind can be in. One state is like just being. So like your intuition, that's just like just being in the moment, just being. And then the other position is being in your head. You physiologically can't be in both places at the same time. But the only way that conflict exists is when you're in your head. When you're just being, when you're like, there's no opportunity for conflict.
Right.
And so he's trying to study how to empower infrastructure and systems for like the education of getting people to just be instead of like constantly being in their head.
Right.
I
would add to that, maybe you can look in Chinese medicine, you can look in all sorts of stuff, but the way they interpret it is there's basically three centers of consciousness. So you have your gut, you have your heart, and you have your mind. And as we have evolved, we've gone from like our gut, where our consciousness was centered at that time, which was more primal. It was like as close to animal as it gets. Then our consciousness slowly rose up to our heart, and then from there up into our mind. And I feel like that the mind one was what the Bible would relate to as the knowledge of good and evil, like the tree that Adam and Eve ate from, essentially. Eventually, when it rose up into our mind, well, now we can see the duality of things, good and bad, and that's where the problems come in. You know, that's where things got way more complicated. We weren't heart-centered any longer. We're intellect-centered.
So yeah, by us being advocates for tea and in the business of tea and in sharing tea culture, like, yeah, we're warriors for this, guys. Like, because that's what tea does, right? It helps you, be more in the heart space, be more.
Right, exactly. It's shifting. You're working on intentionally shifting your consciousness back to your heart. There's a really good book, if you guys maybe you're aware of it. It's called The Secret Teachings of Plants by Stephen Herod Buhner. And that's essentially what it breaks down. It breaks down heart-centered consciousness, but in scientific terms, and it's beautiful. I mean, if there's one book that I think everybody in our culture should read, it's that one, because it speaks in our modern reductionist scientific language to elaborate on heart-centered consciousness and on how this kind of all how it all works, and how reductionism and linear thinking and things like that get in the way of themselves, get in the way of they cause their own problems, And if you can actually shift your consciousness down to your heart and kind of just open up your electromagnetic field, essentially, things start to make a lot more sense, for one. For two, life just gets a lot easier. So, I do want to pause. Elise, you're really quiet. I don't know what that is.
Like you can't hear me?
Yeah, you're. I don't know if anybody else is hearing that too, but everybody else is a little easier to hear than you.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why. Does everybody hear me okay?
I mean, we can.
Yeah.
I can hear it. It's just a
Okay.
little more quiet than everybody else.
Oh.
I think you're just talking less than normal.
There we go.
We got a question from the audience. It's a little off topic, but it's relevant, so I'm gonna address it. Kayla is asking what tea we recommend for fire smoke.
Fire smoke?
Speaking of conspiracies, all those fires that are being purposefully lit across the West Coast right now.
Gotcha.
One of them was a result of started at a gender reveal party.
Yep. No, I was reading articles this morning. People are saying are making the claim that they're intentionally being set by the deep state or by whatever. So I don't know details more than that, but there's lots of fires and it's very serious and people are being.
So I don't understand the question from Kayla Bear.
Like what tea we recommend to drink if they're dealing with a fire smoke in the air. So water is good, but so.
I mean, Sam's not wrong. If you're looking for an herb, something with some lung energy, like mullein, would be a good candidate. Lungwort would be a good candidate. Trying to think of what else off the top of my head. Something with some something that focuses the energy specifically on the lungs and cleansing the lungs. And that would be, mullein would be my go-to immediately. That's exactly what I would think. Great mullein, if you want another word for it.
I don't know if it's just the herb or tea. Probably something you can use for breathing better, like some essential oils or incense.
You could also wear a mask.
I'm sorry?
Here comes Sam.
You could also wear masks if you're into that kind of thing.
Sam and his mask propaganda. No.
A mask, right? Well, to the same point.
You're like a legitimate respirator at that point.
I mean,
when
the smoke particles in the air are definitely bigger than COVID.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When I used to live in Mexico City, sometimes pollution were really, really high, and it was very hard to breathe. So I used to diffuse. Is it a word? To put some to put some essential oils in a diffuser and use Tibetan incense. It was healthy for me.
Tibetan ancients. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
They are great. They are amazing.
Yeah.
The Tibetan ones.
Yeah, essential oils can definitely be helpful. You can also put them on just put them in some water and put them on the stove. That works too. Or if you don't have essential oils, you can just throw herbs in there too. Really, any herb is going to help cleanse the air.
Thank you, Sam, for the terrific view.
You see how nice of a day it is. I don't know if you can tell how orange everything is here.
That is no joke. You're in LA, right?
Yeah.
Looks beautiful, Sam.
And I'm just grateful that the fire is not actually close to us for once.
Right.
Yeah, because usually they are, aren't they?
Sorry, you guys are having fires. I didn't know that.
Where are you at, Priscilla?
I'm in South America.
Yeah, that's what I
in
thought.
Ecuador.
Oh, in Ecuador. That's what it was. Okay.
So let me show you a part of Ecuador.
Oh, nice. Okay, so now we get to see some clear sky.
House right now, and they live outside of the city, like an hour away of the city. Let me see if I can show you. They love trees and the door is closed. Probably through the window.
I wish I could show you guys the hills right now because they're covered in snow. Well, not so much anymore today, but a lot of it melted off today. But
did you get snow at your house?
They love gardens.
Oh,
yeah, we got at least 2 inches down here, but up in Lee and Deadwood, like about 20 miles away, they got like 10 inches. So yeah, we're already sitting on a bunch of snow.
Okay. So I want to make a shout out to tea in Kayla's question because no one recommended a tea yet, so I'm gonna recommend one.
Like Camellia sinensis
yeah.
specifically.
And the recommendation actually, there's no claim about lungs, but when people started making COVID claims with tea, the only like scientific study that I found that actually substantiated any type of claim was in black tea. And black tea processing, there's a polyphenol that's created, and that polyphenol is actually used in inhalers, like asthma inhalers, and it relieves tension in the airway. So nothing about the lungs, but like if you're having irritation in your throat, like if you're feeling a scratchy throat from all the fire smoke, just if you're gonna drink tea, not herbs or essential oils, but if you're just gonna drink tea, black tea would be the best to drink. Supposedly, there's something in there.
Right. Well, yeah, it would have to be like something in the processing that would make it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could just drink tea, you know. But specifically, like you say, with black tea, as it's processed, it would release a certain polyphenol.
Yeah, the Indian Tea Board invested heavily in trying to promote that study. That was the only reason why I found it, and the study didn't substantiate any claim that like whenever that compound is present in tea, it activates the same way it activates in inhaler. So, but it's something.
Right.
Yes.
Kind of my thought along the lines with mullein was it has mucilage in it. I don't know if you know or are familiar with mucilage, but it's it's almost like a gelatinous like fluid that coats the mucosa within your body, and there's so much of it in mullein, and like marshmallow root is another one that has a lot of it. But it soothes and coats and moistens the mucosa of your entire body, but specifically of your digestive tract, of your airways, things like that. It works really good if you have like a sore throat or something like that.
Cool. Thank you. So I'm sure Kayla is happy with that information.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sure Kayla is grateful for that information. She's up in Eugene, Oregon. So the fires are all the way up from California to Washington. It's the entire coast. It's pretty sad.
Oregon's getting some gnarly shit right now.
Yes, they are, bro. Yes, they are. I can't help but think we're on the list next. I could give it a year or two, and my little hills are going to be lit up.
Do you guys get wildfires out there?
Oh yeah, definitely. We had one small one this year. I think it was like 1,000 acres or something like that. That was earlier in the year, but then we got a big old rainstorm like 3 days after it started, and it just put it out. But yeah, I mean, it's just pine forest. It's all lodgepole and ponderosa pines out here, and it's dry. It's more dry than it is wet for sure. If we have a wet year, it's pretty rare. And last year was a super wet year. It was actually like a record. But what that does is it makes the forest like super lush. All these trees grow a bunch, and then it dries back out. Well, all these trees grow a bunch. Winter comes through. All the snow breaks off a bunch of stuff, along with the wind and the tornadoes and stuff that we've had. Creates a bunch of debris. It dries out, and then the whole place turns into a tinderbox. So we're about 2 years away from that. Maybe even next year, to be honest. So.
Fun.
So, speaking about this cycle of like fires and things coming out of it, one thing that I learned in that rabbit hole that I went down yesterday in reading about this whole conspirituality stuff.
That was a good article.
Yeah, it's a really good article, right? Is that it was talking about like the Nazi culture and how the idea of eugenics even came up, and that was like a very kind of spiritual, kind of like hippie mentality of like, well, we respect and prioritize nature and animals, and if that's how nature and animals behave, that like the old got to go out and the weak got to go out and the strong got to come in, then eugenics must be the best thing to do. It must be, you know, our moral duty. And it's just so weird how it's just like from an idea and an ideology that's so like pure and primal and peaceful can turn into something so like hateful and violent.
Right.
Well, that cleansing makes sense. I mean, you know, in our culture, it's preserve, prolong. Don't let anything go. Everything must stay the same. Keep it alive as long as possible. Nothing should change. But that intentional cleansing and those intentional like metaphorical fires are extremely healthy.
Well, even the literal ones, like part of the reason that half of California is on fire is because of the way that we've managed the land.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So does that mean that we as humans should behave that way too?
Right.
That's the dilemma.
If people don't want to admit that people should die, you know, it's like, I mean, what else do you say? Like,
I mean, death is part of life. It's
right,
the last part.
Of course.
yeah, it's like COVID is the forest fire, if you will. You know what I mean? You could just use that as an analogy or whatever. But things are going to show up. They're going to start. No matter how much you try, nature is gonna cleanse itself every so often. Have you ever had MRSA?
Sure.
Anybody had MRSA? You know,
My father-in-law did.
it is the absolute most miserable thing you've ever went through in your life. I mean, it like literally feels like you're on fire. It is crazy. I had it on my foot, and it's from places being too clean. So when you eliminate all of you sanitize, well then there's a vacuum and something you can't sanitize appears within it, and it's probably much stronger than you're ready to deal with, you know? And that's what happens. That's nature at its finest.
So I think the moral dilemma that I'm trying to highlight here is that when humans try to interject
Right.
and like expedite, oh well, you know, they're weak, so we're just expediting this process to get to, and that's where it's wrong. You know, like if it's nature doing its own cycles and processes. You know, we never want to play God. I mean, that's why I don't like GMOs and all of that, because, you know, when you're too heavily trying to influence the nature, it's like we just got to kick back and let the cycles do their thing.
Right.
And so, like, I feel like that in the philosophy of eugenics, it's like justifying or actually telling man that they have a duty of helping nature in this process. And that's bad. That's terrible.
Right, but I feel like that's the difference between intentful, like as in like ulterior motives, and assisting nature when it speaks. So you learn the language of nature, you watch it, you observe it, you find out how it behaves, and you respond to its call, not you come up with some idea in your head why a certain population of people needs to be obliterated, you know. But you watch nature and you steward it, essentially. You know, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Graham Hancock.
No.
What is it? He has a book. I forget what it's called. But he's great. He's into all the like ancient archaeology stuff, and he used to be an archaeologist. He actually got out of it because of the scientific community and their biases. He's a brilliant human, though. But he talks about how the Amazon at one point was like the most barren soil in the world. I mean, you can even find evidence of it today. Underneath all of the fertility is the most like barren, unusable soil. And what his theory and a bunch of other people that he works with, what their theory is that it was intentionally created by humans, what they call biochar. So it was set on fire at a very, very slow rate that essentially fertilized the soil and then created the Amazon rainforest. That's kind of like a distilled, real quick version of his stuff. You'd have to listen to it because he's way better at explaining it than I am. But how do you put this? It's assisted evolution. That's probably the best way to put it. So
I don't know.
it's
The
like-
only assisted evolution I ever want to support is like grafting or
Right.
like with crossbreeding and seed propagation.
Right. Right. And I totally dig it. I mean, it's when our emotions and our ulterior motives get involved that we're like, oh, wipe all this stuff out and do all this crazy stuff. But there's a difference between that and listening to nature
Yeah.
and listening to what it's got to tell us,
Yeah.
and not creating the idea ourselves, but actually hearing the language and responding to a call that's there. And that's a heart-centered consciousness that I was talking about. The only way to actually learn that language is to be listening from here and not here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hey, just FYI, Wikipedia calls Graham Hancock a pseudoscientist. So
that is funny that you would say that. He's got a lot of material out there. He's worth looking into. But
yeah, no, I got him here. I'll look into him.
The best door would probably be like one of his podcasts with like Joe Rogan or something.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, those are a good place to start anyway. He's got books and all sorts of stuff though, but he's a smart dude. He's not,
Yeah, it seems
Friends, I have to bounce out. Continue. Use the Zoom room, no problems at all.
Yeah.
I just have somewhere that I need to be.
Okay,
So, Elise, I made you host.
I saw that.
Keep up fighting the good fight against the big, scary puppet masters
Yeah.
that are trying to brainwash all of us.
Thank you, Sam. We will.
Yeah, we'll see.
Alright.
And I also have to say goodbye. I have to start with my patients like right now.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
bye,
Hope to see you
Priscilla.
next week.
Bye, Sam.
Guys.
Bye.
Hey,
Bye.
hey, Jeremy and Joe, if you guys want to stick around, you're welcome to. You guys still want to catch up.
I mean, I'm not doing anything for a little while, so.
Okay, cool. By looking at Jeremy's lights, it looks like, he's pretty comfortable where he is.
Still partying, man. He's still partying.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeremy, so this article I keep talking about, I'll send you the links to it, but it's written by this guy, and his official title is an emotional historian.
Emotional historian. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Interesting, yeah?
An invented title?
1 second.
I mean, I guess so. I mean, he's like, he runs the Center for Emotional History, and there's other people involved in his thing, but it's like he's like a regular historian. He's like a political historian, but his focus is on kind of the emotional state of people, and his main area of study is Greek civilization.
Okay.
Yeah, and so when I heard about his work, I thought about you. I'm like, oh, Jeremy would probably like this guy's work. Yeah, because not only does he look at the history, like what are the things that actually happened, he like goes deeper into trying to understand the pathos of the people and how they, how an entire civilization was able to move in certain directions.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what's meant by emotional historian.
Yeah.
He's not just a historian that's like super sensitive and cries at romance comedies.
He's not moralizing history, is he?
Well, no, he studies that. He studies like how people moralize things at certain times. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
It's
he
kind of like
doesn't
these
moralize
medical
it
books
himself.
on eugenics. It's all wrong. They're moralizing science. And it's a totally perverse way of looking at the world.
Yeah. So this guy, he would study the psychology of that guy that wrote that book. He would study like what was going on in this guy's head that made him want to write this book. And so yeah, he wrote this article where he drew all these parallels between Nazi culture and New Age culture, which I was like, whoa, this is fascinating. But then he wrote another article that defined this whole concept of conspirituality and like what kind of state someone has to be in. Yeah.
What was his name?
His
Or
name.
just send me the link?
I'll
Or
send you the link, but yeah, I'll pull up his name. Yeah, I went down a little rabbit hole. What his one article like went pretty viral, the one about the Nazis. But then I ended up finding a lot of other work from him. His name is Jules Evans.
What was it? Philosophy for Life or something? What was that?
Yeah. That's his book. He's written books.
Yeah, that's
too.
his website too. It was
Yeah.
like philosophyforlife.org or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, that article I actually liked better.
Yeah, I dug a lot of the stuff that he was talking about in there. He seemed like he was coming at it from a pretty unbiased state.
Yeah.
No, I like when people analyze things from a psychological point of view, because I feel like they tend to be the most detached and the most the most diligent in finding out really why whatever is going on, because they're studying the people that are making the thing happen, not the thing itself.
Yeah.
The psychological interpretations are great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the whole concept of like emotional history. Now that I know about it, and it's exactly what you just said. It's like rather than just saying what happened and being an expert of knowing all the dates and all the things that happened, it's like really focusing more on what was going on in people's heads and
Right.
in their hearts. That was the context of how this happened.
Yeah, that's what essentially put the Bible into perspective for me. I was a strong agnostic, almost atheist for a very long time, until I approached the Bible from a different perspective. Like rather than like historical record, I looked at it more in a like a psychological manner.
Mm-hmm.
You have to put yourself in the mind state of the people who wrote it, not just take their words and translate that into your perspective, because you're not going to get to the point.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible makes perfect sense to me now. Everything that's great. Like, oh, that didn't happen. This is bullshit. Blah, 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 blah. I feel like an idiot because I'm like, well, I was just misinterpreting it. That's what it was. It's a great book. So.
It's one like I think it's the first. It's referred to as a hyperlinked text.
Absolutely.
Where one book's always referring to another book.
Right.
And if you look at the whole Bible as one work, it's a whole different perspective. Like read it from start to end. Might take a while, but it's the beginning of the world to the end of the world.
Right.
It's from Genesis to Apocalypse.
Right. And it's non-linear, like people tend to look at things in our culture. They tend to look at it in a very like linear, chronological sort of deal. And the Bible goes.
Oh, yeah, it is not. Yeah, it's all over the place. Old Testament's all over the place, but it was very deliberately structured that way.
Right.
It's very deliberately structured to things fall apart, come back together, fall apart, come back together. It's structured in a way to understand cycles.
Right. Yeah, it was telling multiple stories simultaneously too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Have you both finished it from start to finish?
Are you talking? Did you say did we both?
Yeah. Have you both done it?
I don't know. Jeremy probably has.
I'm sure Jeremy has.
I've just broke into it in different translations. It goes over my head unless it's translated a couple of times. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm not familiar with like direct Hebrew or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I essentially take like what is it? Bible Hub. Online, it's like BibleHub.com or something. That's a good one.
If you do anything, defer to the new Revised Standard. There's so many translations, but the new Revised Standard version is generally accepted as the most accurate.
Right. Well, in the way when I say translations, I mean people taking the stories and breaking them down from there, not necessarily like picking up the book and being like, all right, Rick, but actually taking people's interpretations to where they've extracted that perspective that it was written in out a little bit, translated that into the modern Western perspective, and then I can actually understand what's going on there.
Yeah, there's a lot of Bibles from like the early 1900s, late 1800s that the translations were a little loose because there was too much effort to make it contemporary.
Right.
And a lot of the idioms and the idiosyncrasies of like the Hebrew and the Greek never got through.
Right.
So yeah, it's a hard balance when you translate anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a couple of the ways that I have busted into it. Jordan Peterson has a wonderful series on it, for one.
Oh yeah, the Genesis series.
Well, yeah, he's got the, what do they call that? The I don't know. It's like the something interpolated, the biblical series, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Breaks down Genesis one lecture at a time, and he's not really doing anything on purpose. He's kind of just getting on stage and talking it out. It's great. He doesn't have any there's nothing rehearsed. It's wonderful to watch him do that. That's a good source. There's like 40 some hours of content just in that one series.
Oh yeah, it's interesting talking. I know a guy. He basically highly educated Catholic man. He said the best interpretation of Genesis he ever heard in his life was from Jordan Peterson, a non-Christian, non-Catholic psychologist.
Right.
And he said, if you really want to have an introduction to Genesis, go to a psychologist's point of view.
Right.
And work from there.
Right.
Don't jump in and everyone tells you that this is the answer for everything.
Right.
Jump in and say here's what you could learn from everything.
Right.
It makes it more personal. I think that's what one thing he did. Just
well, he made it more of a book of wisdom than a dogmatic, than some sort of law kind of thing. Some sort of arbitrarily enforced dogma. He put it up to hey, it's a book of wisdom and kind of identifies the archetypes of what's going on here, and you can translate that into even just your own life, history and all that stuff aside. He did a really good job of it, I think.
I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah,
Thanks
as
for
a
the
Jungian,
recommendation.
everything goes back to archetypes if you're a Jungian.
Yes, definitely.
And if you're a Freudian, everything goes back to your mother.
Fair enough. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, another one that really got me. This is just a recent find of mine, but one of probably the best books I've ever read in my entire life is Joseph and the Way of Forgiveness by Stephen Mitchell. He's a translator of lots of works. He's translated the Bhagavad Gita. He's translated the Tao Te Ching. He's really good at getting out of the way of the message of the story. And the Joseph story in the Bible is pretty short. I mean, it's not super long. What he does is he adds detail, adds depth to it. And adds more of a novel type of vibe to it, to where it's more easily interpretable from our perspective. And he basically tells this beautiful story of Joseph and his whole entire thing, and man, is it profound. And I never looked into the story of Joseph before. So once I had this articulated like this to me, I was like, this is the stuff right here, This is wisdom right here. And that's one that I will probably read many, many, many times throughout my life. And I don't usually reread a whole lot of books, but that is definitely one of them.
What was it called again?
Stephen Mitchell.
Yep. Joseph and the Way of Forgiveness. Yeah, he's got an interpretation of Genesis. Like I said, he does the Bhagavad Gita, he does the Iliad, Odyssey. He does all sorts of stuff. He's a very articulate man, and he's very good at getting out of the way.
Yeah.
You don't feel like there's a motive there. You feel like he's trying to stay as true to the people who wrote the story and what they actually meant. He's not so concerned about the literal this and that, but more about, what were they trying to convey here? Why did they write this story?
One of the best lessons I ever learned when I was studying, there it is. When you're dealing with ancient text, ancient world,
right.
Basically the farther removed you are from the world right now, it's more important to figure out what's not in the text than what is. And he gave us the best example. He said, 5,000 years from now, they're going to uncover a fragment of a paper, and all it's going to say is Jeremy walked into a room and turned on the light, and that's it. We know what that means. We know everything about that. They might interpret that as Jeremy's a god. Jeremy can walk into the room and the light goes on. He can turn on light. He can control light. But we know it's like what they want to hear is Jeremy walks into a room, he turns to the wall, hits a switch, which opens up an AC current, which heats a tungsten filament in a vacuum.
Right.
Like that's what they want to hear, but that's not what you hear.
Right.
So if Jeremy walks into the room and turns on a light, everybody can deconstruct that entire situation from that one line.
From my jackfruit upside down.
So 5,000 years from now, they might interpret me as a god.
Right.
I have control over life because that, it's just that technology is so antiquated or anything, but it's like, what's not there? What aren't they telling you?
Yeah, right. Context, man.
It's hard. And that's why you need like honest historians.
Right.
Is like they're not moralizing things because they're too much in the now.
Right.
And it's just the wrong way to look at things. So it's hard to do because like what Jordan Peterson does, he'll take 3 sentences and spend half like an hour talking about how much is packed into 3 lines of a book.
Right.
So this is really what it means, and this is how they understood it.
Right. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Stephen Mitchell's very good at that as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeremy, when you were in school, was this something that your professors warned you guys about? Is there a culture among history students that you have to be mindful of taking yourself out of the present time when writing about stuff and studying things?
The classicists were very much stayed detached. There were 2 schools of thought, and one of them was if you accumulate enough evidence, you can reconstruct any situation. And the other one is we can only understand the situation by putting it in context with other events at the time. So one of them, you're kind of detached from it and you're a witness. The other one, you're trying to be inside the situation and you're trying to interpret it yourself. And that's not, and like certain classicists did that, certain historians did that. The guys that taught me were very detached. Like they were very like here's how you should translate. Don't screw with the text. If you can make sense of the text as is, leave it. Mm-hmm. Where there are some translators and some editors, especially with Euripides, there are some insane editions of Euripides where people were saying, well, there's this manuscript difference here, so they probably meant this, and they're reconstructing whole lines. It's like, yeah, you don't do that.
Yeah, they're just adding their own crap to a text that can't be pulled apart like that.
Yeah, but I don't know what it's like because I never really studied any history past 1600. So I don't know if it's like the closer you are to an event, if you are encouraged to look at it more from a personal perspective, because it seems like it just happened.
Right.
Yeah,
like historically, a couple hundred years isn't that far away.
No.
I did have a professor, he said that medieval history is the best. And he said medieval history is like a beautiful piece of lace because it's filled with holes, but you have enough to reconstruct it into something beautiful. ancient history has too many holes and it looks like a worn out rag, and modern history is a clean sheet. You know too much. So it's a medieval history is that perfect balance of filling in the holes the best you can because you have a really good understanding of what was going on. And there was a real challenge to it. But yeah, a lot of classicists and ancient historians thought they could fill in every hole to that, and they can reconstruct anything, but that's not true.
Completely agree.
But that was a while ago. You know, a lot of classics departments are just disappearing.
Yeah.
Schools of humanities are shrinking.
Oh, the humanities is in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just not a priority. Anthropology is pretty much gone, which is sad. So it's, you know, I've been away long enough that I'm not quite certain what's going on right now, if there is sort of a moralizing to the humanities or not, but I guess I was lucky enough to. But then again, I went to school in Scotland, so I was the it was the very British education, and all the guys that taught me were Oxford or Cambridge guys.
Good night.
We were
Mostly-
closer to the history at that point too, though.
Yeah.
To America, and you're even more detached. So
Have you ever met a classicist that believed that aliens are responsible for some of the unexplainable histories of human?
Not professionally. I know a classmate that had fantastic ideas.
How
The
is
best
there like
one
an
was how aliens constructed the pyramids.
yeah?
Sound waves. They have using vibrations, and vibration creates sound waves which can levitate stones. So it's like pushing it across a sheet of ice, and that's the only explanation to building the pyramids.
there are some wild stories
But-
about who's capable, what people are capable of. You dig into the old Chinese texts and the old alchemical texts, and there are accounts of people doing very, 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 very superhuman things.
Yeah.
But we don't believe that's possible because we live in like a material perspective. You know, we aren't looking at energies. And, I mean, you could look at like Tesla. You know what I'm saying? Like he was coming from a totally different perspective. He was open to a whole lot of different things. You know, but you look at it from the modern scientific perspective, and we very much have our blinders in certain ways. Not to say scientific theory isn't amazing; it's absolutely incredible, but it doesn't account for a lot of stuff. It eliminates possibilities. It's like no, that's hooey. You know, that's some woo woo whatever spiritual law. You know, there are some serious accounts of people doing some serious superhuman things, and if you dig enough, it actually makes sense. You're like, oh, okay, I can see how that would happen. It's way beyond your comprehension, but nonetheless, you actually take it as some form of like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
There's this. I wanted to mention. There's this metaphor of like. Imagine trying to explain to someone who doesn't even know, like take an aborigine, right, that's never even seen a road, let alone a car or something.
Yeah.
Try and explain to them how to get from point A to point B while driving. Imagine all the stuff that you'd have to explain to them. Like everything from like how the car works, how to steer it, how the roads work, all of the contingency plans for like what to do if you break down. Like imagine trying to explain all of that to someone.
Yeah.
That's what it's essentially like, trying to explain some of these, or trying to interpret some of these ancient texts, but from the other way around. So you're looking at Los Angeles with no idea what a city is and trying to make sense of it.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah. There was a good analogy when, I guess a religious analogy, when they said, "You really think you can understand like the mind of God?" And he asked me, "Have you ever stepped on an ant? You ever killed an ant?" "Oh yeah." "Did you ever find the need to explain to the ant why you're going to kill him?" "Have you ever killed a spider? Did you ever find the need to stop and explain to the spider what's about to happen to him?" Like, no. So he says, "Really, do you believe that you understand the mind of a being greater than you?"
And, that's a fair analogy. It's so far beyond your comprehension.
Yeah. There was the Tierra del Fuego, when the conquistadors first arrived on the shore. These men dock their ship, like this massive ship, off the coast, and they go to shore. And they go to shore wearing gilded golden armor. And the people look at them, and they kind of see them as gods. It's what they were wearing was so incredible that they never saw anything like that. And they kept asking them, "Where did you come from?" And they turn around and they point to the ship that's docked. And they just kept asking them the same question, and they didn't understand what was going on. They couldn't see the ship because the largest ship they had was essentially a canoe. It was something so far beyond their comprehension, they actually couldn't see it.
Uh-huh.
And it's like what that level of, like, if you're introduced to something so far beyond your capabilities and what you can comprehend, like mentally, they couldn't see it. They didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah, you weren't built in the way, you weren't built in a way that would allow the understanding. It would take a lot of time to be able to actually figure it out.
Yeah.
I totally get that. That's kind of how I don't know, similar way how I look at like aliens and stuff like that. We're gonna go down a deep path if I get too deep into that, but yeah, we have this idea of extraterrestrial, and we see like a very human and other sort of thing, and what is alien may not be like we look at aliens in like an anthropocentric manner. So we just project humans onto something else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas other cultures did that like in a spiritual manner. They projected gods and things like that, but they still projected them anthropocentrically. They still projected them in the image of like humans. In some way, it rooted itself in humans. Like the old Hindu gods and all that stuff. It looked like a man somewhere in there. And I think we look at, aliens, quote unquote, in the same way. We're just projecting ourselves onto what we don't understand.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a deep rabbit hole, but it's worth, I don't know. The reason that I'm sitting here drinking tea, and I will completely 100% say this, the reason that I am sitting right here, right now, drinking tea is that I admitted to myself that I didn't know anything, that I had no idea what was going on. That was the first time I ever actually learned anything in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Was that I was like, all right, maybe literally everything that I have ever thought in my entire life was wrong, misconstrued. It's some sort of like fabricated by this story I was telling myself. But the key there is to look at wrong in a way that isn't like blaming. It's okay to be wrong. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing even if it was wrong. So
I think that's something a lot of people lack, the ability to see themselves as to be wrong,
Right.
see themselves as the cause of the problem, that can actually see themselves, because I think that's like a lot of the conspiracy theorists.
Right.
They, they are attracted to these. They are attracted to a certain spirituality that gets them off the hook.
Right. Absolutely.
And they don't have the need to take any personal responsibility.
Right.
Because real personal responsibility is assessing the situation in a way where you're prepared to say, I was wrong.
Right.
My fault. I shouldn't have done that. And that's, I think, not as common as it should be.
Right.
It's just a question, are you prepared? Because a lot of people don't analyze the situation with the objective of proving themselves, I got it right, you got it wrong.
Right.
And he says, no, you have to go into every situation. It's like, the evidence, just document the evidence wherever it leads.
Right. Yeah, I like are you prepared? Are you prepared to realize that everything is your responsibility?
Yeah.
Everything. Literally everything.
Like if you go through like a really traumatic event and you're trying to understand it, you really won't understand anything unless you're prepared to say, damn, that was my fault. That's all on me. And, people are trying to break it down and analyze it from like, well, I did this and he did that and she did this, and, trying to reconstruct a situation that's sort of impossible. But all you really need to do is understand the role that you played. And if it's a role where you participated in the problem, or you facilitated something that shouldn't have happened, or you were somehow a catalyst to this event, then that's it. What role did you have to play? But it's all about responsibility. I mean, this is why Jordan Peterson had that huge following over the past few years. His whole mindset is take responsibility for your own life.
Sit up straight with your shoulders back. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's the story of Jesus, man.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. It's you take all of the sins of humanity upon yourself, and you carry your cross up the hill to your own crucifixion. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not fluffy rainbows and unicorns, man. It's a rough deal, but it's still the best case scenario.
But it's very much just basically what he taught was that you're responsible for your own life.
Right.
Because Judgment Day is an accounting of your life with Christ as judge. It's just you and him. No excuses.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take full responsibility for your life. You can't sit down and take an accounting of your life and say, well, I was forced to do this. No, you weren't. You could have chosen not to. I think that's it. The personal, it's all about personal responsibility.
I completely agree, man. If I nod anymore, my neck's going to break. I'm like totally on the same page. 100%. It's all justification. That's something that I always come back to. Everybody's ready to tell you why this, that. I was that person. I'm prone to that type of behavior just kind of naturally anyway. But I was the convincer, the justifier. I don't know if you guys are into astrology at all, but my sun sign is a Libra. And I'm the diplomat. I'm the manipulator, man. I'm really good at talking the talk, but not walking the walk. You know what I'm saying? And I always had justifications for why I did everything. Oh, well, because of blah blah blah, and I would get you to believe it because I was good enough at talking that I could get you to believe my justifications.
Yeah.
Biggest downfall as a person was to stop justifying everything that I did and take responsibility. And I learned a real hard lesson. I had a specific situation in my life where one of the people I cared about most at the time was always used to tell me, "Grow the fuck up, Joey." Because she used to say that all the time.
Yeah.
I didn't realize what it said until one day it clicked in my head, and she was like, she's telling me to stop justifying everything that I do, to stop blaming everything that I do on something else.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what she was telling me.
Mm-hmm.
From there on, my life is just completely different. Take responsibility, figure it out. You know, even if it doesn't seem like your fault, it's probably your fault, or you're doing something in your life that is, adding to the pot. You know what I mean? You're doing something there that's contributing, and that's all that matters. That's all you got control over.
Yeah. Do you know the Briggs-Meyer test?
This sounds familiar, but I can't place it, so I'm gonna go with
Yeah, it's interesting when someone had me take that. He's an interesting guy. He has all of his friends take it, and he keeps a record of it because he wants to know the best way to deal with people. So and it's not like this is going to nail you like 100%.
Right.
But it's a really interesting test to take, the Briggs-Meyer, and you're one of 16 different personalities.
Okay, so it is Jungian.
And it's kind of fascinating how accurate it is. It's kind of, I mean, it's a couple of years ago, I had to take like a neuro something test. It's like a 6-hour test where they test your memory, your certain skills. It's just this really lengthy, exhaustive test. And at the end, that you have to sit down and they go over the results with you. It was shockingly accurate. Like they knew everything.
Right.
Everything. And what was more interesting is that they were able to predict the kind of things, and they got it right. Like I had, cognitively, I have slow reaction speed. I have, in short-term memory, I can't recall as quickly as others. So, I'd be terrible at Family Feud kind of thing, but it's not. It's not a debilitating thing at all. I'm just below average. And she said, but we knew that. I go, what do you mean? Well, I had I had a tumor, benign tumor in my head that I had to have removed. And it was right here, and it was pushing on a certain part of the brain. And based on the type of, and I've had like seizures. So based on the type of aura I had, and based on where the tumor was, they knew exactly what part of the brain was affected.
I want to know what this test is. Give me 1 sec. I have to get my phone to my lady. This is super.
When was that, Jeremy? Was that recent?
What?
When you had that tumor removed?
Oh no, I've had 4 surgeries.
Oh wow.
For them, and radiation treatment for it. But that's from 2003 to 2013. So that was a 10-year period.
Wow. That was you were in college too,
I got a really cool scar. Yeah, I got a scar that goes from here all the way down.
It's surgery or what?
Yeah, I had surgery. So if you can actually see the beginnings of a scar, and it goes all the way down. So they had to. It wasn't like a brain tumor. It was a growth on the inside of my skull that was pushing in on my brain.
Okay.
And no one knew about it, and it was completely asymptomatic until I had a seizure. Then they gave me an MRI and realized, oh, there we go. That was easy to find out. But it was interesting. Like I had an abdominal aura when I was talking to a neurologist, because before you have a seizure, you're kind of warned. People have auras. A lot of people see streaks of light, or you hear certain sounds. Mine was like my stomach was filling with air, and then you have a seizure. it's kind of crazy how it works. But yeah, you have these auras,
I don't know if you've
and
have we ever talked about this? At least we ever talked about seizures?
Well, maybe nope, not really.
This is a deep topic. I have seizures. So like,
yeah,
like currently to this day, yeah, they're cyclical. They're hormonal essentially. So I have a period, basically.
mhm.
And so about every month I have an episode. It lasts about a day. And it's kind of a long story, but essentially I know exactly what you mean when it comes to seizures. They're
It's
not like normal epilepsy, but I definitely know what it's like to have a grand mal seizure, you know.
yeah, like I don't have epilepsy, but I'm prone. I haven't had a seizure in a long time, but I'm prone to them.
I know mine are coming on. That's
Yeah,
they're not triggered by anything. They're not random by any means. I can feel it coming on the day before, and then I know the next day I shouldn't be driving. I need to stay home. You know what I mean? It's very predictable. I can feel it.
Yeah.
Tingling. It's like the auras you're talking about.
yeah,
And I'll start like salivating. And it's if I do this during my episodes, my old lady is like, I mean, she's like right next to me. You know,
yeah,
I'm doing this thing, and my fingers get all tingly and stuff. I'm just like, I start to zone out. She's like right next to me because it's probably gonna happen. They're not always like bad. Sometimes they're just like waves, and I get like real nauseous. And then, you know, the worst ones have been so bad that they don't stop. I just have one, and then I have another, then I have another, then I have another, and eventually my lady drags me to the ER, and they shoot me up with a bunch of elephant tranquilizer, and I stop seizing out eventually. So.
load you up with like Dilantin
Mm-hmm. Dilantin, yeah.
to calm you down.
Right, yeah. And they've had to shoot me up like 3 times before I'll actually stop seizing. It's like crazy. But that comes.
Yeah.